Hi and welcome to Film 3.uk Movie Recap. Today, we will be reviewing the movie 12 Years a Slave 2013, so if you're a fan of the film or just curious about it, stick around. In our video reviews, we may include some spoilers, so please be careful if you haven't seen the movie yet. In the first part of the film, Solomon Northup is introduced as a free black man living in Saratoga Springs, New York with his wife and children. He is then lured by two white men, Birch and Hamilton, to travel with him to Washington, D.C. to perform as a violinist. Once in D.C., Solomon is drugged and wakes up in chains. He is then sold to slave trader, Birch, and taken to a plantation in Louisiana. There, he meets other slaves, including Patsy, Eliza, and Samuel. They are all put to work in the fields picking cotton. One day, Northup tries to stop a fight between Patsy and another slave, Platt. As punishment, Northup is tied to a post in the hot sun for hours. When he is finally released, he is severely beaten by Birch. Northup is then told by Samuel that he will be killed if he ever tries to escape. In the second part of the film, Solomon Northup, Chiwetel Ejiofor, is taken to a slave auction, where he is bought by Mr. Ford, Benedict Cumberbatch. Ford is a relatively kind slave owner, and Solomon hopes that he will be able to purchase his freedom. However, Ford's foreman, John Tibbets, Paul Dano, is a cruel man who often mistreats Solomon. One day, Tibbets gets angry with Solomon and tries to hang him, but Ford intervenes and saves his life. Eventually, Ford has to sell Solomon to another slave owner, William Epps, Michael Fassbender, because he needs the money. Epps is a much harsher master than Ford, and he often beats and rapes his female slaves, including Solomon's friend, Patsy, Lupita Nyong'o. Despite the horrific conditions, Solomon remains hopeful that he will one day be reunited with his family. In the third part of the film, Solomon is put to work in the fields with the other slaves. He endures backbreaking work and cruel treatment from his overseers. One day, he is caught trying to escape and is whipped mercilessly. Solomon nearly dies from the beating, but is saved by another slave, who tends to his wounds and helps him recover. In the fourth part of 12 Years a Slave, the film's protagonist, Solomon Northup, is forced to build a coffin for a fellow slave who has been killed by a cruel slave owner. Northup is then forced to watch as the slave owner brutally beats another slave. Northup is eventually able to escape and return to his family. The fifth part of the film 12 Years a Slave 2013 begins with Solomon Northup, Chiwetel Ejiofor, still working on the cotton plantations in Louisiana. He has been there for several years and has been through a great deal of hardship. One day, he is approached by a white man who tells him that he can help him get out of slavery if he is willing to risk his life. Solomon is hesitant at first, but he eventually decides to go along with the plan. The man helps Solomon escape from the plantation and they make their way to a nearby town. Solomon is able to get in touch with his family and they arrange for him to be freed. The film ends with Solomon reunited with his family and starting a new life. After Solomon is hired out to Mr. Tibbets, an angry carpenter, he is falsely accused of stealing Tibbets' axe and is beaten severely. Desperate and fearing for his life, Solomon attempts to escape but is captured and brought back. Tibbets punishes Solomon by chaining him up and leaving him in the hot sun. When Tibbets returns, he finds that Solomon has been freed by two other slaves, Samuel and John. Furious, Tibbets goes to get a whip to beat Solomon with, but Solomon grabs the whip and fights back. Samuel and John grab Tibbets and hold him down while Solomon whips him. They then tie Tibbets up and leave him in the sun. In the seventh part of the film 12 Years a Slave, Solomon Northup, Chiwetel Ejiofor, is sold to a new owner, William Ford, Benedict Cumberbatch. Ford is a relatively kind man who tries to protect Solomon from the brutality of his overseer, John Tibbets, Paul Dano. However, when Solomon is forced to build a fence, Tibbets grows frustrated with him and begins to beat him. Ford eventually intervenes, but Tibbets continues to abuse Solomon. One day, while Solomon is working in the fields, Tibbets and a group of other white men come to get him. They tie him to a tree and beat him mercilessly. Ford eventually comes and orders them to stop, but Tibbets is not finished with Solomon. He threatens to kill him if he does not leave the plantation. Fortunately, Ford decides to purchase Solomon from Tibbets before he can carry out his threat. This saves Solomon from a fate worse than death, but he is still a slave. He will never be free. Of the film in the eighth part of the film, Solomon Northup is working in the fields with other slaves when he is approached by a white man who tells him that he can help him escape. Solomon is hesitant at first, but the man tells him that he knows people who can help him get back to his family. Solomon decides to trust the man and goes with him. They travel for a few days before reaching a house where a woman and a man are waiting. The woman tells Solomon that he is free and can go home to his family. In the 9th part of the film 12 Years a Slave, Solomon Northup is sold to a new owner, William Ford. Ford is a kind man and attempts to treat his slaves well, even teaching Solomon how to play the fiddle. However, one of Ford's other slaves, John Tibeats, is a cruel man who constantly mistreats Solomon. Eventually, Solomon has had enough and Tibeats gets into a physical altercation with him. Solomon wins the fight and Tibeats is forced to leave. In the 10th part of the film, Solomon Northup, Chiwetel Ejiofor, is taken to the house of a cruel slave owner named William Ford, Benedict Cumberbatch. There, he is brutally beaten and forced to work in the fields. One day, Ford's nephew Edwin, Michael Fassbender, comes to visit and shows an interest in Northup. Edwin eventually buys Northup from his uncle and brings him to his plantation. There, Northup is treated much better and even becomes friends with some of the other slaves. However, one day Edwin decides to sell Northup back to his old master, Ford. Northup is once again subjected to brutal treatment, but he never gives up hope of one day regaining his freedom. If you found the review enjoyable and wish to watch the movie, we've provided a link in the description where you can access it. If you appreciated the review, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Till the next time, bye.